Hello and welcome back to Sorry What, friends. My name is Jason and I hope you're ready for today's story. Just a little heads up, if names change somewhere in the middle, and you think I've gone senile and forgot to edit, just keep listening and all shall be revealed. Now, let's get to it, shall we? I could tell something was on Marissa's mind as soon as I came in the door. "Hi sweetheart," she called from the kitchen, turning and giving me a big kiss as soon as I put my briefcase down. But she looked a little flushed, and she turned away from me without ever quite looking me in the eye. All through dinner, as she chattered away about her day, or listened to me sharing the latest gossip from my office, there was a nervous edge that was hard to miss. Marissa and I had been married more than 4 years, and I knew her well enough to know that something was up. After dinner she brought me a second cup of coffee, then sat across the table with an earnest look on her face. "Honey, can I talk to you about something?" I nodded and she said, "I need to ask you to do our thinking thing, okay? Don't respond right away." What she meant by our thinking thing was something we'd learned during a counseling session we had a few months before we got married. Both Marissa and I were a bit impulsive. We tended to react quickly and, at times, get mad quickly. Our courtship was passionate but full of arguments, some of them nasty ones. We finally decided that if our relationship was going to survive, we'd need some help. Our counselor, Dan Ellman, taught us to take a moment. When we were angry, just sit back and wait, think for a few moments, before bursting out with an enraged response. Sometimes the thinking lasted just a couple of minutes, at other times one of us would wait until the next day to reply. He also taught us both to ask the question of ourselves, when we were angry, what's more important? The thing you're fighting about right now, or the person you care about so much? And of course, we both could see that the answer was always the person. It may sound hokey, but these tricks had helped us a lot. So I said, "Okay, Mare, tell me what's on your mind, and I'll think before I say anything." She leaned forward and took my hand. "First, Simon, this is the most important thing. Don't ever forget this. I love you, more than I've ever loved anyone. I love being your wife, and I will never ever leave you, okay?" Well, that sounded alarming. But she pressed right on. "I've been thinking that shit, I don't know how to say it. I've been frustrated about our sex life, and you've been feeling frustrated. Wait just 1 minute, Simon." Her voice was sharp. "The thinking game, right? You promised. This won't be easy, but please, sit and listen, and give me a chance." "Sorry, you're right. I'll shut up," I said, swallowing my angry words. "Honey," she said more quietly, "I know a lot of it is my fault. I know I'm not always as open or receptive as you want me to be." I kept my mouth shut, but barely. Goddamn right, a lot of it was her fault. I love Marissa with all my heart, and I never regretted marrying her, but our sex life was on the disappointing side of ordinary. She didn't want sex more than about once every 10 days, and I had to work hard at it to get her up to once a week. Just as bad, she was firmly vanilla. I got a blue job twice a year, on our anniversary and my birthday, and even then she did it reluctantly, and managed to make me feel thoroughly guilty about it. She was equally reluctant to let me go down on her, which I would have loved to do at least 3 times a week. She'd either flatly refuse, or make me feel like I was mildly perverted for doing it. She'd never let me go on long enough to bring her to a no, and then she'd never let me kiss her afterwards, claiming it was disgusting. Look, as any happily married man knows, and probably the unhappy ones too, it's not all about sex. I love my life with Marissa. Her beauty, her great sense of fun and adventure, just not in the bedroom. Her loyalty and devotion to me, her kindness. Yes, I wanted more and better sex, but I understood that it just wasn't in the cards. And on balance, the deal I had was more than worth it, even if I jacked off to corn in my study a lot more than I wanted to, and ducked my wife a lot less. So I sat and listened as she continued. And I didn't much like what I heard. "I know I've always been a goody two-shoes about sex, Simon. Hell, you know my mom, so it's not hard to figure out where I got it from. But lately, I don't know, been feeling restless, not horny exactly, but something. Like needing to try something, get out of the rut we're in. Or the rut I'm in. I know it partly has to do with hanging out with Sherry and Susie and the others." About a year earlier, Marissa moved to a new real estate firm, where she sold residential properties. There was a lively group of women there, and in no time she had a new group of friends. They got in the habit of going out for a regular Friday happy hour, which seemed like the highlight of Marissa's week. I knew the women slightly. Some were married, 2 divorced and 2 others single. "Anyway, Simon," she stopped, looking at me to make sure I wasn't about to yell at her. "I don't want you to think this comes from them, because it doesn't. Although talking with them about, sex, plays a part in it. What it is, Simon, I want to try to open up our sex lives a little. I want to try a little experimenting with other men, and I want to bring the excitement home to you, and make our sex life together as great as it can be." She stopped, no doubt waiting for my explosion. I opened my mouth to shout, then managed to shut it again. I promised to just listen, and that's what I was going to do, though my blood was pumping furiously through my veins. I'm not talking about an affair, nothing like that. Just casual, no-string sex with a few other men. One-night stands. Or maybe, if I find somebody I like, 2 or 3 times. But no romance, no commitment, nothing that could ever be a threat to what you and I have. I adore you. And remember the first thing I said. I love you, totally, and I'm never going to stop being your loving wife. I think I could loosen up a bit this way, in a way I've never been able to do with you. And I think we'll both get the benefit of it. Baby, this isn't something for me alone. I know you're disappointed in our sex life, and I want to put a charge into it. She stopped, watching me warily. She actually seemed amazed that I wasn't tearing into her, or even stomping out of the room. One more thing, this isn't about cutting you off or anything crazy like that. We'll have at least as much sex as we do now. More, probably, because I think this is going to get me really revved up. That's the point. I want to have more fun with sex, more fun with you. I love you, Simon. She squeezed my hand, and then sat back. She looked nervous and sort of exhausted, like she just hiked up a steep hill. Silence. Then finally I said, okay, Mare. I think I better do quite a bit of thinking before I reply. Tomorrow after dinner, alright. And without waiting for her answer, I stood up and left the kitchen. I sat in my study with the door closed for nearly 3 hours. Shocked, really. I loved Mare, but I would never have expected her to approach me about ducking other guys. I actually expected we'd live together our whole lives with a boring sex life, but happily. I knew that her gang of 6 from the office had something to do with this. Sherry and Susie in particular were pretty round-heeled. Sherry was single and seemed to go through boyfriends like Kleenex. Susie had been divorced twice, and the word was she'd been caught cheating both times. It wasn't hard to imagine they're filling Marissa's head with the joys of new clocks. You might think that my first thought would be an enraged, no ducking way, my wife is not going to make me a cuckold. You want to go that way, there's the door, which... And in fact that was my first thought. It was pretty much all I could think about for the first hour or so, until I started to calm down. As I grew calmer, I had a few more rational thoughts. One was that I certainly liked the possibility of Marissa becoming a more open sexual partner. I liked the idea of sex more than once every 7 to 10 days, and oral is a regular part of the menu. I'd like to see her in sexy stockings or bustier occasionally, and maybe to play with a sex toy once in a while. I also believed Marissa that it would be just sex with the other men. At least, I believed that she believed that. But whether it would stay that way was an open question. What if she and some guy really hit it off? What if the sex was fabulous, mind-blowing? What if some great-looking guy decided she was the girl for him and put on a full-court press? And I had another thought, somewhere in there. About Diana. Diana, my boss's assistant. Diana, the 24-year-old with the long dark hair who flirted with me pretty much every time she saw me. Who liked to tell me she was between boyfriends, and sure wished I was available. Did Marissa's plan include me going out and getting some fresh kitty while she was trying on some new clocks? I would absolutely never have touched her, or any other woman for that matter. Marriage meant faithfulness to me, period. But what Marissa had asked me pretty much blew up all my previous thoughts about what our marriage was going to be. By the time I finally left the study and went to bed, Marissa was asleep. I'd sat up until well after 11:30 making plans. One thing was for sure. The unquestioned trust I'd had in my wife was now a thing of the past. Whatever we did or didn't agree to do, going forward, I was going to be a far more watchful husband than I had ever been before. In the morning we had a slightly tense breakfast. I played it cool, sticking to neutral subjects, while Mare kept watching me, alert to any signs of how I was thinking, wondering if an explosion was coming. I grabbed my bag, said, "See you tonight, honey," in a cheerful voice, gave her my usual kiss, nothing more, nothing less, and headed to work. My best friend from college, Rodney Dart, was a security consultant for one of the big oil companies in town. I took him out for a long lunch, explained about the Molotov cocktail Marissa had just tossed into my marriage, and begged for his help. I also gave him my keys to the house, and my extra set to Marissa's car. By the time I got home, extra early to be sure I'd be there before Marissa, his guys had done their work. There were mini microphones hidden in every room, linked to a recorder in the basement, and a tap on the phone. There was also supposed to be a recorder under the seat of Marissa's car. I'd check that later. Just as promised, my keys were under the mat on the back deck. I decided on the spur of the moment I'd wait another day to talk to Marissa about her plan. Frankly, I hoped I'd get something from the recorders to give me a better sense of what was in her mind. She had to know I'd be furious, at least at first. I couldn't help guessing that her friends had filled her head with stories about the joys of casual sex. When Mare and I were at dinner, I kept things light, as if there was no elephant in the room. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Honey, are you ready to talk about what I said last night?" "Mare, you were right to remind me about the thinking game, and frankly I'm not ready yet to talk to you. That was a pretty big shock you laid on me, and I don't want to say something I'll regret." She came to me and sat down on my lap, curling her arms around me. "Okay, I guess. But I don't want you ever to forget the biggest thing of all, okay?" I smiled and kissed her. "I know. You love me." "No, you love me. Right?" She laughed and kissed me back. "Right. You know me, you. And we are going to be together forever. Now come with me." Smiling, she pulled me by the hand into the bedroom, sat me down on the side of the bed, and started taking my clothes off, interrupting her actions for some loving kisses. The sex that followed was a little less vanilla than usual. Without my even asking, Marissa kneeled between my legs and blew me for several minutes, taking her time more than ever before, even licking my balls briefly. She didn't let me finish in her mouth, but that was all right. Instead, she climbed up on me cowgirl style and rode me, letting me caress and pinch her melons for a while, until she fell forward with her head on my shoulder and dug me hard. It was some of the best sex we'd had in a while. When it was over and we were cuddling together, half watching an old Law and Order rerun, I felt a tiny bit calmer. I knew that reassuring me was a big part of why Marissa had gone all out, or at least all out by her standards, but that didn't mean it didn't work, at least up to a point. But it didn't stop me from doing what I'd planned to do. Late the next morning, I took a long lunch from work. First, I drove over to Marissa's office parking lot. Making sure I couldn't be seen from her office, I took the flash drive from the recorder under her front seat and replaced it with a blank one. Then I drove home, got the recordings from the basement, and headed back to work. I figured there was a good chance Mare might have called one of her buddies, either from the house or from her car, and I needed to know if there was anything she hadn't yet told me. There was. Quite a bit, in fact. I heard a 10-minute call she made to Sherry from the house after I left for work, and then a shorter one from the car to Susie. And the long and the short of it was that Marissa's new clock's plan was quite a bit further along than she'd bothered to share with me. To be exact, it was precisely 2 clocks further along. All of a sudden everything was different. I still loved Mare. At least I thought I did. But I didn't trust her anymore. It's one thing to come to your husband and say, "Honey, we need to charge things up. Could we talk about me having sex with other men?" That's a lot to lay on a guy, but at least it's honest. And it leaves open the possibility of the husband saying, "Duck, no, not on your life." But it's quite another thing to have that conversation when you've already begun your exploring, with the help of your slut friends. Mare had hooked up with 2 guys, both thanks to Sherry who'd made the introductions. Mare had ducked them both, and given the second one a blue job. Seems the first guy was a selfish asshole who didn't take his time. Mare, being a nervous first-time adulteress, had hated it. But Sherry had talked her into a second try, with Rowan, and that had been a big success. On the recordings I heard Mare giggle, telling Sherry that Rowan had rocked her world, and that she couldn't wait to do him again. I was beyond livid. I spent the afternoon in my office with the door closed, ignoring calls and messages, occasionally cursing, thinking hard. I knew that I could simply dump the ducking count. And that with the recordings in hand, a divorce would be no problem, on advantageous terms for me. The trouble was that I wasn't sure. I was too stunned to have any clear sense of what I wanted. No, that's not true. I couldn't see past my immediate desire, which was to put the ducking fear of God into my hole of a wife, who I still loved. Worse luck for me. And who clearly had been let down a particular garden path by some friends who had the world's worst judgment when it came to relationships. So, as they say, one step at a time. No big decisions, just the small, immediate ones. I didn't have to figure out the next year or the next 10 years of my life. Just what I was going to say to Marissa at dinner. I decided to put all my rage and frustration aside. Or rather, since there's no way I could do that, at least to hide it. I try to be patient and thoughtful, and see what I could find out. I was going to do the world's best goddamn acting job ever seen. I left work a little early and surprised her at home with takeout Chinese, which was her favorite. I'd set the table and used the pretty napkins she liked, put out beer glasses, etc. Everything to set a warm, loving mood. She thanked me with a big kiss and a hug, and we enjoyed the dinner, smiling and holding hands a lot. I'm sure she wondered about what I'd have to say to her, but was feeling good about the signals she was getting. I led her into the living room after we cleaned up the kitchen, and we settled together on the couch. Time for a talk, I guess. Okay. She nodded, a big smile on her face. Yes, Simon. And thank you for doing the thinking thing. I know I must have really shocked you the other night, and maybe even worried you. She leaned forward. But I want you to remember. I interrupted her. I know, babe. You love me, and you'll never leave me. right? She nodded and leaned over to kiss me, her arms around my neck. Then she sat back, looking happy and relaxed. Maybe even a little smug. Okay, I said, mostly I have a lot of questions. As you can imagine, I've been doing a lot of thinking about this. So, first, is this experimenting just for you? Or do I get to go out and have sex with other women? Silence. Mare looked uneasy. I couldn't believe this hadn't occurred to her, but she seemed totally buffaloed. I don't. Wow, Simon. I don't know. I guess well, she leaned forward, earnestly. I guess I thought that it was me that needed to do the exploring, to loosen up and open up sexually, so I'd be a better lover for you. We both know that I'm the more inhibited one. This was certainly true. But is that really fair? I pressed her. For me to stay at home, or go bowling or whatever, while you're out having sex with other men? Would it be fair that I get less sex while you get more, plus the fun of trying out some new clocks? But Simon, she said, clearly frustrated, you'll be getting more sex too. I promise. This is really going to fire me up, and I'll want us to make love a lot more. I smiled, as if this were just a friendly conversation. But it would still be you getting more than me, right? I mean, all my sex would be with you, but in addition you'd be getting laid, what, 2 or 3 extra times a week? Somewhat testily she said, no, it wouldn't be that often, probably. I really don't think you're focusing on the point, Simon. The point is that I need to open up sexually. And you can't or won't do it with me. Yes, I get it, Mare. How about we try the thinking game on this one, alright? I can tell you're getting upset, so let's just put this aside and come back to it when you're calmer. She took a deep breath, then nodded. Okay, yes. I'm sorry. You were so patient the other night, I'll try to calm down. Can I ask my other questions? I said, and she nodded. The look in her eyes made clear she understood by now that this wasn't going to be a fun conversation. I know you said that the other guys were only going to be for sex, and only once or twice each. That they'd be no threat to us, to our marriage. But that doesn't mean I don't worry about it. I mean, what if you meet a guy and the sparks fly? What if he's a fantastic duck, way better than me? What if somebody really rocks your world? Her eyes widened in alarm, as she heard me say the same words she used to describe Rowan to her friend Sherry. Honey, she stammered, looking hesitant. It's not going to be like that, I promise. I love the way we make love, and nothing is going to change that. I mean, even if some other guy is, good sexually, it'll still be just sex. Oh, and what if he's terrific? What if he gives you more pleasure, more ass, than I've ever managed? And your 2 or 3 times turns into 6 or 8 or 15, just because you're having such a good time. No, Simon. She struggled to regain control of the conversation. It absolutely won't. I simply won't see anyone more than a few times. A few. The other date was only once, or maybe 2 or 3 times. How many is a few? 6, 10? Baby, can you trust me on this one? I love you, and I'm simply not going to let anything jeopardize that. Okay, I said. Speaking of trust. As you can guess, my absolute trust in you has been pretty shaken by all this. Despite all the love yous. You're my wife and I need to be able to trust you completely, pure and simple, no exceptions. Otherwise, we don't have a marriage, or at least not one that I can be happy in. So, here goes. First, if I agree to what you're suggesting, will you promise to be completely honest with me? She smiled broadly. This was an easy one, and I could see her relax. Yes, baby, of course. And you won't cheat on me. Sleep with any men behind my back. No, I promise. And you'll tell me the whole truth, and not conceal anything. Of course, Simon. Okay then. I sat back, pretending to consider. Then I said, but you know, I just asked you all those questions in the future tense. What about in the past and present? You know. Have you been completely honest with me up to now? Have you slept with any men behind my back? Have you told me the whole truth? Her face froze. She grew pale as she looked at me. Again, I couldn't for the life of me imagine how she hadn't anticipated these questions. She looked utterly terrified. I waited for nearly a minute, while she stared at me as though looking at a ghost. Finally I got up out of the chair. Well, I guess I have my answer. It wasn't the answer I was hoping for, but... I was nearly out of the room when I heard her wail behind me. No, Simon, please. Don't go, let me. I turned around to see her sobbing, her face buried in her hands. I waited, leaning against the wall, until she started to calm down. It must have taken several minutes. I'm so sorry, she said quietly, through her hands. I know I should have talked to you about it first, before I did anything with, other men. I said. So you mean you've started on your ducking around campaign already? My voice was cold and harsh. I knew the answer, but I didn't want her to know about the recording devices. She nodded. Still looking down, she said, I knew I should have waited, should have had the conversation first, but Sherry had these guys lined up, and She swallowed hard. I just got excited. I kept my eyes on her but didn't speak. If she had lied to me about the 2 guys she'd already ducked, our marriage was over. I'd decided that hours earlier. So inside I was feeling a tiny morsel of relief, along with a big churning wad of rage. I'm not dead. Duck off and leave me alone. When I'm ready I'll be in touch. And don't you even think about ducking anyone else if you have any hopes of staying married to me. I reread the text I'd just written, then hit send. It was short and sweet, just what I was aiming for. It was 36 hours after our last conversation. I'd walked out of the room, grabbed the suitcase I had packed earlier, and driven off to an Airbnb near work that I'd booked for a week. In those 36 hours Marissa had sent me 30 or 40 texts, and called and left more than a dozen messages, but this was my first reply to her. She was clearly terrified, which was just fine with me. The ducking stupid witch. Was this really the woman I'd loved so devotedly, so faithfully? The woman I thought I could count on to be on my side through life? My week at the Airbnb turned into 3 weeks. I spent most of that time just going to work, coming back to the Airbnb, eating takeout, and thinking. I had a couple of long phone conversations with my big brother out in Oregon, and another one with my college friend Rodney. Both of them knew Marissa pretty well, both of them listened patiently and generously, and both let me rant and fume without jumping in too quickly with advice. I was really grateful to them. My thoughts and feelings were all over the place, and I tried just to write them out. Keeping a journal and writing in it every evening actually helped a lot, though I'd never done it before. I could look back over the pages and see the ebbs and flows of hatred, jealousy, and feelings of betrayal, as well as the love for Marissa that was still reeling me underneath. That shit doesn't go away instantly, no matter what anybody tells you. She ducked up, and ducked me up and ducked us up, that was for sure. But she'd also made me feel happy and safe and loved for years, and that doesn't disappear overnight. And so I reminded myself I didn't need to decide everything right away. One step at a time. Decide about tomorrow, about the coming week. Let time do its thing. At the end of the 3rd week I sent her another text. I'm coming back tomorrow night. You're moving into the guest room, at least for now. Get all your stuff out of our bedroom before dinner time tomorrow. The kids were all over me as soon as I got in the door, shouting and jumping. I could hear her in the kitchen, so I called out, "Hey babe," and heard a reply. "Hi honey, dinner will be about 20 minutes, want to take the whirling dervishes outside?" I chased them into the backyard and they jumped onto the swings. Carl was nearly 6 and Amy was 3.5, and they were both full of energy. I pushed them on the swings, kicked a soccer ball around with them, and generally tried to wear them out a little until it was time to eat. Denise and I smiled at each other over the spaghetti and meatballs. It was hard to get a word in edgewise when the kids were in full flight. Carl wanted to tell us all about learning how to add. Amy played a kazoo for the first time in preschool. The neighbors got a new dog, so why couldn't we get one? Etc. After dinner, the usual. Cleaning up the kitchen, getting 2 excited children into and out of the bathtub, pajamas, teeth brushed, 2 books and a made-up bedtime story each, and then, finally, blissful quiet. It was 8:45 p.m. I got the bottle of wine and 2 glasses, and met Denise in the living room. We sat quietly, her nestled into me on the sofa, for maybe 10 minutes before either of us said a word. After a while I said, "What a calm life we lead, right babe?" She just snorted. "Yeah, nothing to it. A piece of cake." She kissed me and said, "I wouldn't want it any other way, though. I love you, and we both adore those 2 crazy monsters." She rested her head on my shoulder and we sat quietly for a few more minutes, enjoying our wine. Then she said, "Listen, I just bought a new nightie and I'm thinking, maybe it's a little too revealing. Could you come and take a look?" I gave her a big grin. I said, "Let me just get the doors and the lights and I'll be right up to help you with that, alright." I happily watched her ass wiggle as she headed down the hall, giving me a little extra just for show. "Wait a minute, you're saying Denise? 2 kids? Did I miss something here?" "Not at all. Ever hear the expression older but wiser? Well, you're looking at him." Marissa and I tried to hold on for more than 6 months before I gave up. We went back to the counselor we'd seen before, Dan Ellman. We talked, God did we talk, about what Marissa had done. Her desire to expand the range of her sexual experience, how she'd fallen a bit too easily under the sway of her friends, Sherry in particular. We talked and we talked, I listened and listened. I was back in the house again, and we were even having sex, sometimes. But it wasn't good. I wasn't comfortable, and I didn't feel safe. I was, at least some of the time, so angry I could hardly speak to her. We tried to live our normal lives, going out with friends, but even they could see something was off. In the middle of one session, probably about the 30th by then, we were meeting twice a week. I just lost it. Sorry, I'm through listening. Time for me to talk, okay? Marissa looked at me, interrupted in full flow, talking for the umpteenth time about her needs, and how she realized she should have communicated better. I think I'm done. I think we're over. Marissa gasped, but Dan just looked at me without expression. I was pretty sure he had seen this coming for a while. Mare, you did something really selfish, really awful. You forgot that our first commitment was to each other, to protect each other, keep each other safe. You went out and ducked a couple of guys, because you wanted to. Because you'd come up with some bullshit reason to make it acceptable. Opening up our sex life being a more satisfying wife for you, all that shit. And you started in on it without thinking through all the things it might mean for our marriage. Hell, without even telling me. To say the least, that wasn't living up to the commitment you made to me. Tears were sliding down her cheeks, and she tried to break in. I put up a hand to stop her. I wouldn't lie to you and tell you I don't love you anymore. But I don't trust you anymore, and 6 months of sitting here with Dan hasn't changed that. I need a wife who I absolutely know will never put her needs or desires ahead of my feelings, or at least one who won't put a knife in me to get something she wants. And I'm sorry, I don't believe you can ever be that wife for me. I turned to look at Dan. Dan, I'll keep coming for a couple more sessions, if you think that would be helpful for Marissa and me to work through the breakup. But I'm going to file for divorce. I looked back to Marissa, who was sobbing, staring at me entreatingly. Sorry, Mare. I stood and left the office. We did have a few more sessions, including one I had alone with Dan. I talked to him pretty frankly about how, with benefit of hindsight, Marissa just seemed emotionally immature to me. Not malicious, just not fully able to see past what she wanted enough to understand how it would affect other people. To my surprise, he agreed with me right away. I wish it were different, Simon, but I think you're right. She's nearly 30, but in some ways she acts and thinks like a college kid. And when I see her alone, I will be telling her that, straight on. She needs to do some growing up, to understand herself better, before she embarks on another important relationship. God bless Dan Elman, he got through to her. Or at least enough that she stopped fighting me and let the divorce go through. I had a little over a year of what I think of as the classic post-divorce bounce back. First I sat around and drank a bit too much, brooded too much, then I turned it around, started working out again, and had some pretty meaningless one-night stands. I dated Diana from work for about 6 weeks, and we had a lot of fun, both in and out of bed, but we both knew it was never going to be anything serious. On a Saturday in January I woke up and surprised myself. Maybe I had had a dream, I don't know. I found myself thinking, okay, you're done with this sheep. Casual sex was fun, but it wasn't for you, so no more. Let's get your head straightened out, figure out what makes you happy, then do that. I decided I'd recommit to a simple project. Having fun. I'd call my friends more, go out to the movies more, take more vacations. Worry less about women, and about sex. Let time do its thing. And of course the universe promptly told me, what the duck do you know? Approximately nothing, that's what. The next Wednesday I was meeting Rodney and his wife Allison for dinner. When I got to the restaurant it turned out it was going to be a double date. Allison's cousin Denise had just gotten out of an unhappy relationship in Phoenix, and moved here to take a new job. Rodney had said to his wife, hey, why not invite Denise to dinner with us? She and Simon might hit it off. We were married 16 months later. Rodney was my best man, and Allison was the matron of honor. And Marissa. I don't know much, really. She moved out to the West Coast, and I heard she might have gotten married. I wish her well, but she isn't part of my life anymore. And that's it for today's story, friends. If you enjoyed today's story, leave a like and comment before you leave. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button so you don't miss any video. Goodbye for now and I'll see you in the next video.